All right, let's get started. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us for the fourth and I would say final session of the Gaming Guild for Kernel Block 7. And today we'll be joined by Jin. So I'll do a little bit of intro on Jin, who Jin is and the work that he's done. But I, of course, wanted to start with just I guess going back to who kernel block 7 is. It's also, I would say, a good intro for Jin to know who the folks are in this block. I did tell Jin around what kernel was at the start. So kernel started around late 2020. It was initially started as an exploration of what Gitcoin University would be. So it invited 100 builders to just talk about Web3 and kind of figure out what kind of technology we should be building now that we have these new tools that allow us to explore new economies, new financial primitives, and it's of course grown to become more than that. We're now in the seventh block of kernel. It's grown from builders to having a diverse set of people from all over. And I think that's really is what the strength of kernel is. It's not just the builders. We have people that come from diverse fields such as writers, musicians, artists, um, industry professionals from all over, from Deloitte, Apple, Facebook, crypto veterans from Coinbase. And what's more important is kernel fellows, I would say, are three-dimensional beings with superhuman alter ego. So we have people from all over, like we have a circus artistic director, an astrophysicist, and we also learn a lot from, I would say, fellows who join us that have like a lot of knowledge on indigenous knowledge and some of the learnings that can be learned from there. So I do feel that there is a lot of collective intelligence in kernel, and my hope is also Jin is able to experience that. So one thing that I'm hoping today also is to involve some of you folks in the discussion. And yeah, so in a few slides, we'll be doing just that. To talk a little bit more about the Gaming Guild. So this is the fourth gaming session, and what we'll be talking about is the open metaverse. So the first few sessions were kind of leading up to this one. We talked about infinite games and board games and the consilience of the two, and I'll talk a little bit about consilience and its context and what we're discussing. The next one is we talked about what games we should build in Web3. So for the second session, we had Ronan to join us, Ronan from Conquest Eve, to talk about how his game kind of was also related in a way with old board games. So how to kind of use that knowledge to design games in Web3. And on the third gaming guild session, we had Arb and GVN from Trust Support talk about decentralized narratives and kind of the new things you can do with the new ways of storytelling in Web3. And now we're talking about the open metaverse. So it's good for us to kind of step back a little and zoom out. A lot of the, I believe that a lot of the things that will be important in Web3 will be correlated to the open metaverse. And we have the perfect guest to join us, of course, with Jin, who will be talking about the open metaverse. And with that, I do want to talk a little bit about who Jin is. So if you haven't yet, I think everyone here should follow Jin on Twitter as DankVR. He's been building on VR and crypto since early 2010s, which is a long time in crypto, right? Which is way before a lot of this hype that is happening on just the market cycles. He's been researching web and VR and NFTs for quite a while, and he's towards the Metaverse Makers, which is a very amazing group of people building the open metaverse. So a lot of the times, a lot of the projects that mention building on the open metaverse are a lot of hype, and I feel like the metaverse makers are the people who are actually building the tools that people will use once we go on the open metaverse. And I shared a few of these pictures, Jin, also because because maybe we can talk about them one by one. But first, maybe a question to you, Jin, like maybe talk to us a little bit about who your avatar is. We see that you're using the avatar right now also on the video. So yeah. So I guess first,
Oh,
welcome, and yeah, and would love to know more about the avatar.
thanks. Yeah, use this avatar a lot for avatar interop research, and it's built off a kind of a standard Vroid, which is one of the most popular avatar builder apps. And this devlog that I've got on avatars, if you Google avatar interoperability, I believe it's going to be the first result. And you can kind of see all the different engines and platforms that you could bring your avatar in. And I, just do a lot of documentation and field testing on what avatar interop looks like and how others can do it. And that actually helped lead to a lot of adoption in the West, because the format VRM, which is royalty-free format based on GLTF 2.0, which is now international standard for 3D models, wasn't relatively known in the West because it was developed in Japan. And just like crossing the language barrier really helped a lot of people see the value in it. And I think visuals are a universal language. So
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was trying to figure out how to make the screen bigger. But yeah, thank you, Victor, for helping all out.
yeah, no problem. I can
Cool,
scroll
yeah.
back up.
Yeah, we'll share the links as well, so you guys can go through all the research that Jin has done. And I
I
think
share
that
the
is
URL in the chat.
nice. Yeah, and it's
The book link will link to all the other related devlogs around avatars too.
cool, yeah. So it's a generic avatar that did you change some of it to kind of, I guess, mirror your identity as well?
Yeah, just kind of modding and remixing.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about interoperability as well. I think it's an important topic. Um, and I do want to talk about these two other pictures. One thing that Jin also does is he also tries to support a lot of these open source projects. I do remember, Jin, that I think the first time I ran across your profile was when you had the Decentraland community support blender. And I think it's very important that that we support these tools that are building the open metaverse. And maybe want to talk a little bit about the Dank Nugs project. I think it's a very fun project that you created that supports some of these open source builders.
Yeah, Dank Nugs, I mean, I've been a huge advocate of open source forever, but when it comes to funding public goods, just kind of sense that a lot of this space is really fixated on any project that has a token in front of it, and not those that are really important that aren't tokenized. So I wanted to create a token of appreciation for those that wanted to support public goods related to the metaverse, but weren't necessarily like crypto projects. Things like Blender, things like OpenBrush, which is an award-winning VR painting program. By buying Dank Nugs, which I minted on Manifold contract, and they're 3D, really high quality nugs. You can support the open metaverse that way, and I will put it to projects and that are creating really important and impactful open tools, and just kind of the foundations and the kind of deep tech that can unlock a lot of other things to be built on top. So like OpenBrush, you can go into VR and paint whatever and then export into multiple different file formats. And with a few tweaks, you could also make it export a self-hostable WebXR site as well. And with a bit more time, it'll also be multiplayer. So you can collaboratively build out content that can then be interoperable or spice up your existing content. Like I've got some example worlds in which you could, well, let me show you. Is my screen showing?
Yeah, we can see it.
Does everyone in the chat see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. The world I'm about to go to is something in which uh, I'm building this street in which it kind of visualizes a lot of um, related orgs and projects to the open metaverse. So there's M3 and some relics of MetaFactory as well. Um, and I've got some digi physical buildings here. So this goes into a place that's in Oakland. And this is the Internet Archive building. And what you see here is the neon overlays. That was all done in OpenBrush. So you could bring in your existing 3D models into there and kind of use it as an art mold, and then kind of layer on like a neon animated style on top. And it looks really cool with photogrammetry as well. Let me jump into the archive.
And this is Hyperfire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, look, nice. Love the textures.
Yeah, the textures were processed through style transfer to get this underwater look. I was trying to work on caustics, but I couldn't get it to export properly in GLTF yet. Very, very close though. This world exists in multiple platforms also though. Some that do work with the caustics.
Which platforms are those?
VR chat, I've got a good version of it there. And Janus Web, which also supports the OpenBrush shaders. I've got it there, and it's all open source. So if you, I'll drop the link in the chat. Oh, cool. Brewster Kale was there. Yeah,
That's
I'm
cool.
actually very inspired by the Internet Archive, and that's kind of a huge motivator for Open Voxels, a DAO that we just spun up to work on all sorts of voxel art interoperability with crypto voxels, and start to kind of build the pieces to create a Wayback Machine for the metaverse.
Cool. We're actually also inspired a lot by the web and the Internet Archive. Brewster was a speaker, I think, in one of the firesides, I think 2 weeks ago also. Here in
Nice,
Kernel.
nice.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. So let me just go a little bit back to the presentation. I apologize. Also, I'm a bit slow. I'm on this small laptop screen, moving windows around. Cool. Yeah. But just to end on this last picture, I did mention that in kernel, in particularly in this block, there's been some discussion on digital gardens. I think that there is some bit of synergy happening there. Like when you look at what Jin's research, or how Jin presents his research, a lot of it really speaks to what digital gardens are. So just to bring home the point that everyone should check out Jin's research. It's there. It's posted there on the chat. All right, and then so I guess let's start the discussion, Jin. I would say a lot of the discussions in kernel uh, are very diverse. It goes through a lot of other fields, not just builders, and it goes through, for example, token ecosystems, governance, culture, music as well. And I think that's one of the things that I do try to share with the builders that are joining us. One term in particular was consilience, which was, I guess, popularized by E.O. Wilson, where he said consilience is a conviction far deeper than a mere working proposition, that the world is orderly and can be explained by a small number of natural laws. And the diagram on the right is from his book, Consilience, wherein he specifies that environmental policy, ethics, social science, and biology, like most of the time, these fields are taken as silos, but there's learning that happens in the intersections. And I do feel like it's similar in games that, for example, VR games, and it's not a silo versus, for example, board games or mobile games or play to earn game design, or even just just governance and these wider fields as well. So maybe we can start with that, Jin. Like, is there anything there in the slide that speaks to you? Is there anything there that or maybe in your work, is there anything that you see has some consilience on in VR in building the open metaverse, or just anything you want to share around the topic?
Yeah, I mean, metaverse, like the whole field is very cross-disciplinary, and that it requires kind of like a polymath mindset. And this is why I'm really big on collaboration and real-time collaborative tooling, to kind of make, or maybe I should say, break the silos between teach, learn, and build, because it's going to take a lot of disciplines and a lot of different areas of perspectives and knowledge bases to come together to actually build the best version of such. And that's kind of where digital gardening also comes into play as well, where you can transform a knowledge base into a knowledge space to have meetings in and share ideas and cultivate kind of longer form discussions and thoughts, and kind of get into group flow state faster with people from various other disciplines.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Like getting into a flow state in a group of people, especially with a diverse group like what we have in Kernel. I feel that's really what will drive the developments here in this new space that we're all building. So cool. Yeah, thank you for that, Jen. So I do want to involve some of the folks here. Like, one thing that I really like about Kernel is there are a lot of smart people in the fellowship. Like there's much more knowledge that can be learned from everyone rather than just me talking and asking questions. And I guess uh, one thing that I also did, Jen, was kind of just look through your Twitter, and I see that a lot of the things you shared there are also discussions that I think are relevant to the things that we discuss in Kernel. For example, this one on the left around building in crypto, and why do people build monuments? What role can they serve in the digital society? And what would a society without libraries look like? And what can we learn from past metaverse attempts? Maybe I can share a little bit, and then I can involve the other folks. One thing that I've been reading recently is Theory of Everything by David Grieber. Have you read the book, Jin?
No, I've heard of it, but no.
Yeah, I think it's a good base to start from when thinking of why people or why societies do certain things or how they organize themselves, like how it starts. He goes through early indigenous societies and kind of tries to think of why we got stuck in capitalism in the first place. Like, before, a lot of the societies were very, very different. Like, each one was like an own alien society in itself, I would say. So yeah, so I want to share that book, and kind of yeah, if you do have the time to read that, I think it might answer a few of the questions that you have here.
I've always wanted to
And
make like a digital library that looks like a library. I can't wait for headsets to be clear enough to read text.
so when you mean like a digital library that looks like a library, like a VR space that you go into, and it's an actual
Yeah, but
library
at
with
this,
books that you can get. Yeah.
yeah, but not many people read books nowadays. So that's why I've been really interested in level design. Because if you can spatialize and kind of use environmental storytelling and create like art assets that people can learn from, then I think more people will experience digital culture and history that way.
Yeah, that's cool. And Glenn, maybe they want to hop on and talk a little bit about the library that you're building.
Yeah, really excited, and yeah, great to meet you, Jim. This is just incredible work, and it overlaps so much with what we're doing in other places. So this is really fun. So yeah, what we're trying to do with the library. So there's a bunch of folks who've gotten together within Kernel to think about what a kernel library could be, and how might we curate media onto our shared record effectively. And so we're starting to kind of go through that process of how do we curate together. The first curator is Andy's syllabus, for instance, or I know Andy is also curated for DWeb, and was the librarian at the most recent meetup. And so we're thinking of that as like a starting point, but then really thinking about what are some of the primitives as to how does this community curate for itself. Who can propose and recommend books to go in the library? What's the process do we all agree to of that those digital objects going in there, and thinking about.
Are you talking about the real DWeb, like the physical meetup that just happened?
Yeah, and Andy was the librarian for that, and so that this was part of, I think, the inspiration for how we were starting to think about the kernel digital library effectively. And so
cool.
we're starting to go through like, hey, how do we think about these digital objects? And as we create those primitives, we're thinking about the same thing for music and for other things. I think we're all kind of tired of using Amazon links and Goodreads owned by Amazon links and bookshop.org front for Ingram, the monopoly player in the indie bookstore space. Like, how do we think about what's on those cards in a card catalog, and how then do we sort those into the catalogs for this community? Just starting with kernel, right? Like, how does this community decide what media, what do we want to point to and in what ways? And so
are y'all doing it kind of episodic, like a book club maybe?
So that's one of the ideas of, in terms of what are the different apps on top of this. Like we have book clubs within kernel, and we definitely want to start pulling them in. That's actually run by this woman Amelie, who's she's actually the co-founder of Alexandria Labs, which is one of the Web3 book publishers, and so they're involved in the kernel library too. So would love to kind of hack more with you on this of like, how do we think about a virtual representation of this? Because I think we're thinking along the same paths of just that, how do humans relate to these digital objects? What are the ways that we can encode those processes, that data, in ways that we can all agree, at least within the community of kernel? And then, what can we do with that? And I think, certainly these kind of how do we visually represent it is really, really interesting, and thinking about, kind of open metaverse on that front would be really fun. And Adam Lieber, who's in here too, is another friend working on a bunch of these things. So I think there'd be a bunch of things that'd be fun to play with together on that front, as we figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. I have so many HackMD notes that I've been making HackMD books just for all the HackMD notes, which are over here. And then I'm like, man, this is too many HackMD books. And now I'm like creating 3D kind of like representations of those books as objects that can open them up. And
oh my God. Okay, we need to talk more on this. This is amazing. So cool. All right. Well, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just very, very keyed off on the library idea. I think this is really, really fun.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, I think that was a nice moment of collective intelligence coming together. And yeah, and maybe we can go through a little bit on the slides again, Jin. Like I do see that you also explore governance, DAOs experimenting with governance strategies, using tokens to incentivize people as well. And that's a lot of the thinking that's been happening in kernel also. So Glenn and Adam, some of the folks here, I think would be good to talk to after this presentation, and just discuss these questions that you might have.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Jen, you know me as Chew normally in the meta crew.
What up, Chew?
How's it going?
Cool. Nice. Thank you again, Adam, for connecting us. Cool. And then I wanted to run through a few slides that talk about the metaverse and VR a little bit, Jim. So I know you've been building in VR for quite a while and on crypto. And I wanted to, I guess, pick your brain around your perspective on how it's gone. So some of these pictures I've shared here will hopefully drive the conversation. The first one on the left, of course, is Terraforms, the NFT project around virtual land. And I think a lot of the conversation in VR and the NFTs is about virtual land. And some of the topics we've been discussing in kernel is land as an economic primitive is something that I think we should explore further, right? A lot of for example, in games, a lot of the virtual land that is being created is scarce, when in reality, like virtual land is infinite. So
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's one lens that I was looking at. So CryptoVoxels, I know you went through CryptoVoxels. You're one of the builders there. I did see CryptoVoxels coming up as well in along the same time as Decentraland, and was really impressed. Like one person building CryptoVoxels was like building it at a faster cadence. I feel like the other metaverses out there.
Yeah, it was like a year before DCL went live.
Yeah, so that was really impressive, and it was there was no token behind it, and it was yeah, and it was just technology being built for the sake of like building virtual land, right? Um, and I did want to share also that this I snuck in this picture earlier today because in the context of I guess in the context of the metaverse, there's been a lot of discussion on what it is. Recently, I've been playing Persona 5 Royal. Do you know the game, Jim?
Yeah, through Smash Bros, but I know about it.
Oh, yeah, and one of the concepts there is the metaverse. So this concept is everywhere, right? And it's slowly coming together in the future. And I think the one of this GIF is one of the visions you had for, I guess, for a digital garden, which is a 3D space where you can kind of hop in and and do a lot of things in the space. So yeah, so I guess with that context, maybe you can talk to us a little bit, Jin, around I guess how you got started in building crypto and VR and how you kind of see it progress to where it is now.
I think when DCL came out, the ideas of how NFTs would play a part started to really click, and it was very skeuomorphic. And CryptoVoxels gave an opportunity to start experimenting at a much cheaper and faster way. Because like DCL Land, they did one big auction and then it took like 18 months for a public launch, whereas Voxels was like $30 versus $1,000, and you could start playing right away. So I just started experimenting there. Plus, I knew B Nolan from other projects, and he's like a web VR OG, and it was an opportunity for us to kind of experiment with Introp from the very beginning, because we could, me and a bunch of other VR developer friends just kind of moved into a district and used it to as a way for us to showcase our projects that were happening in various other platforms, and got like a devlog on such as well, because Voxels has been growing out from the center slowly. So it was also a really interesting foil versus the one-time giant auction that DCL did at the time. And just as a research environment, I just found it super interesting, like the cadence of expanding the supply and the building tools that were built directly within the client, because DCL was, you had basically a text editor to actually create your scenes for the longest time, and just a lot of other variables as well, like how similar it was aesthetically to Minecraft, which made it a really good selling point to kind of explain virtual worlds and blockchain to other audiences using familiar language, in a visual sense. So, but lately I've been interested in how to kind of preserve and archive and capture the history of such, because the world is constantly changing every time that you log in. Like this is my street and they're a few years apart, and it's not like a video game where you ship it and later on people will create emulators to recreate it perfectly on future systems. It's more like the web, where you capture a moment in time, and that snapshot is something that you can visit, but the snapshots that we currently have on third-party clients are insufficient to the real thing at the moment, which worries me about the longevity. And we want to build things that last, and the digital world is only like a blip in human history timeline. Like 25 years in terms of the Internet Archive as the benchmark is nothing compared to libraries that have lasted thousands of years. So It's also a way to kind of explore digital preservation, and the voxel format isn't a open format, so and a lot of virtual worlds aren't built on open standard rails, so it's a way for kind of exploring how to cross that bridge over to open standards that can stand the test of time. You could actually go back into the Wayback Machine and pull out VRML files that still work and load into Blender and whatnot, that are decades old. And I've been creating a lab around such for a while now. So Open Voxels is years in the making, but all pro bono projects. And part of Open Voxels is how to essentially create a more sustainable model for DeSci / open source R&D. And so we spun up a Juicebox DAO and are treating it as an interop lab, and giving out grants for different projects. First, we're going to release a data set so others can play around with snapshots of the world and of wearables soon. And then create living museums next, where instead of just like showing photographs of how things were, a snapshot of a virtual world is one that you can immersively walk through and see it as it were back in the day. Right now, it's pretty stylized, but I want to create a representation of such and then alternate realities of such.
Yeah,
Like this
it's
one.
really cool. Yeah. Oh, wow. Did you, I guess, did you focus building on crypto voxels, or did you explore the other metaverses that were being built?
Oh, I explore a lot. In fact, I'm building on so many a day. Like some days I'm building on 5 different platforms at a time. I like to build in a way where
How easy is that? Yeah.
well, you kind of start out with the assets first, and then I kind of see it as like, okay, with the assets, then you kind of have a workflow, and I should really create some flow charts in the future, but in a way where you reduce the amount of friction to kind of import and export them between all the different places. GLTF is really good. VRM for avatars is really good, which is also based on GLTF. And then there are some tools to do some conversions here and there between different rigs and formats and whatnot. So I think the measure of friction is something important in terms of like how to reduce the amount of or just kind of find ways around walled gardens, because I just think it's kind of antithetical to the open metaverse of like, I mean, it's kind of like both ways, where if you want, you can build a local first like virtual world where you are the god of that world. You can do whatever you want, but also people can fork it and create their own. And I think open source models like those on GitHub kind of give you the best of both worlds, which kind of puts into perspective that one tweet about governance structures and how democratic ones aren't. I'm just kind of interested in ones beyond just that, because like GitHub projects are kind of like they're not democratic in the sense of everyone votes to merge a PR per se. It's kind of like the project maintainer has pseudo privileges, and they could choose what passes and what doesn't. But anyone is free to fork, so it's kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah. Are you aware, Jin, of the work that's being done by the MetaGov folks and in this project by Nathan Schneider, the modular politics?
No, I would love a link.
Yeah, take a look at the MetaGov, because the MetaGov folks, they've been thinking about I guess also alternative forms of government for digital spaces. So let me share it here. And one thing that Nathan Schneider was working on was this pluggable, I guess, governance module called modular politics. And they're working with Mindtest, which is an open source Minecraft, to be able to kind of test it in these virtual spaces.
Oh, cool.
So it's mod Paul there, that one, governance mod for Mindtest. And if you want, I can connect you with him also.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, I think that's thank you for that. That's nice context for how the I guess the VR and virtual space of Web3 came together. Crypto voxels was one of the earlier ones, and of course we have Decentraland, we have Sandbox, we have all these other ones, and we'll talk a little bit about the newer ones. Okay, let
I
me
like
just
how
go
they're
back.
using virtual worlds like Minecraft as sandboxes. I think virtual worlds are a allow for way better rapid prototyping of governance structures than
Mhm.
trying to do like things in the real world. And it just kind of reminds me of back in the day where virologists would study WoW when I think a
Yeah, I
worm
remember
like
that.
went through
Yeah,
it. Uh,
like there was a
yeah,
plague that spread around the WoW, right? Like when someone touches another player, that it would spread, and they use that for research in
yeah,
virology. Yeah, I remember that. Cool. Yeah. And to your point about using virtual spaces as a way to experiment um, with I guess alternative forms of governance. So Adam just shared with me this show called Trauma Zone, which was around the fall of the Soviet Union, and how they kind of experimented with capitalism when the Soviet Union or Russia was transitioning into it, and that had a lot of pain, like that created a lot of bad externalities, right? But if you do it in these virtual spaces, I think it's a good way to experiment with governance without really affecting a lot of people, and really just trying to find out what is the best way to do it.
yeah, exactly. That's what was I was hoping for with Decentraland because they started off with a whole vision of a lot of different districts, like taking up 30% of the land.
Uh-huh.
But the project kind of took too long to actually ship and
Yeah.
build out these parcels, so momentum was lost. So like all these blue areas were
Mhm.
different districts that were community governed, and I just saw this as a gold mine for governance research.
Yeah, yeah, it's too bad. Like I just hear from the mainstream that there's not a lot of people using the central land, right? So it's too bad that they lost the momentum.
Yeah, I put a proposal very early when they had a grant program for a collaborative real-time editor that you could use to create scenes with, and then we could rapid build a lot of areas in. And like I showed, like we got more done in 1 hour than some of these districts got done in like a year or in their entire lifetime. But it was not much response from the official team. The DAO is way more responsive, so I guess we were a bit too early before the DAO.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. It's like like as I was saying, I think people should be reading all of this writing that you have created already. Like there's good ways to do certain things, and yeah, and really grateful for the work that you're doing there. Cool. Yeah, I do have two more slides. I know we're kind of a little bit pressed for time, Jim. So let's just go through
Mhm.
the slides, and hopefully I can give the fellows some more space also to ask you some questions. Um, so the next one is about interoperability. Um, yeah, and I know that your work has been a lot on interoperability. I feel also like that's what will kind of help bring these VR worlds into the mainstream. Like a lot of the discussions with NFTs, for example, is how do I use this NFT into these other environments, um, and and yeah, maybe talk to us a little bit about this slide. I actually got this from one of your presentations, I think, and how you see interoperability in the context of the open metaverse.
I think it's going to be synonymous with ownership, especially once people experience like bringing their identity between platforms. The whole concept of meta goes back to the original Greek definition, meaning beyond. And I just see, kind of ironic to want to try and lock things in. And when it comes to Entrop, what you're seeing there is a VRM file that is brought into many different platforms. VRM was designed from the ground up for interop. And the license in terms of use and ownership info, it can be all encoded in the metadata of the file itself, rather than something that's decoupled, like with a token or something. And so wherever that you bring that file with you, it also brings along the relative metadata with it.
Yeah, and is VRM, I would say, enough for the job? Like, can it move across all of these different metaverses?
With what can?
VRM, sorry, like the
Yeah,
VRM
there's
file
already
format.
hundreds
Yeah.
of applications. So there's like, Ready Player Me just raised 56 mil for Avatar Introp, and they're building on what VRM is based on, GLB. But the thing is, their strategy involves like the use of a permissioned SDK in order to have their avatars brought with you everywhere. And also their avatars are CC BY non-commercial. So it's not really true ownership of your identity. The one that I built mine on is from an editor that could export VRM, and the base meshes were CC0. So I think that's a better foundation to build your identity upon, where you can have full ownership of it. But yeah, like I want people to understand the power of files and how bringing a file with you between different places is the best kind of version of it versus like a company's SDK.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm just thinking how we can kind of make that the norm, right? Like, people have been so used to like logging in with their account and then assigning skins to their account. So like it kind of needs a change of mindset on how we manage our identities and not tie them to these accounts. Cool, yeah. And I do have two more slides, Jim, and then we can go to Q&A. One is, how do you see the future of VR? I've been seeing a lot of these new platforms like Hyperfy and Webaverse as well. I know you're building on Webaverse also. And yeah, maybe just give us your take on where do you see the future of VR going? Like, is it going to be on the Quest, for example, or is there like any technology we should take a look at to kind of be there to be able to ride the wave before it comes?
I think WebXR is definitely going to be a sleeping giant that wakes up in the next few years. And Hyperfy and Webaverse were two projects that were born in M3, the Discord/community that I steward. And so they're kind of like, in a way, siblings. And we've been working on ways to make them more interoperable. So right now we do have like a initial proof of concept of bringing your Hyperfy worlds into Webaverse, and both of them support VRM avatars, so you can bring those in between them. And just in general, like their interoperability also liberates you to kind of focus on your strengths and niches. So like Webaverse is really into the kind of MMO, like build your own game and procedural generation and AI stuff. If you look at the GitHub, there's a ton of AI building tools going in. Things for like text to 3D, text to like procedural generation of worlds and mobs and NPCs, also just mad science everywhere for the game experience. Whereas Hyperfy is more building towards the VR chat, social VR sort of experience. And, Interop allows folks to kind of not need to feel like they need to be spread thin, competing on every front, whereas they can just kind of focus on those target experiences and make it the best of, and then people can kind of bring their stuff between them to unlock those strengths out of the box. But WebXR is the most frictionless and the most targets the most devices, and it's getting really good with WebAssembly, WebGPU, and just other advancements that with pass-through like AR immersive mode as well, that is making its way into the WebXR spec. And yeah, a lot in the next few years that I think is gonna make it be taken more seriously. And it's not a like web versus native argument either. Like before Webaverse, the lead dev Avier was working on a way where you could overlay WebXR on top of native apps. So he's got like some tech demos where he's like in VR chat and you see this thing on his wrist over here. That is a WebXR app. And so you could run WebXR kind of like as holographic widgets that could, it doesn't talk to the base app that you're working on in a way. It's kind of like AR and VR. And so you could kind of use it as like sprinkles on top of your ice cream, you know, per se, and create portable apps. And, you know, that's kind of the most positive sum vision of building the metaverse I see.
That's cool. What tooling do you use to build on WebXR, Jim?
The tool chains definitely do need some work. I mean, Blender is, you know, a tool in every WebXR dev's tool chest. And I'm a big fan of like tools that are no code or just minimal amount of code. Hyperfy is doing some really good work there. So like in Hyperfy, the editor is very, you know, drag and drop and configure things, add triggers, and you can create like some simple games and apps. But I think like it's going to be divided where like programmers will create templates for artists to remix. And I think that's the strategy that other side is going for as well via templates. And we want to be compatible with best practices. So, and I think it's a good strategy.
Cool, yeah, I agree. I think the reason that Unity also became so successful was it lowered the barrier for people to build games, and I think like these platforms that are less code and more drag and drop, I think that will enable a lot more builders to build on these spaces. What about VR chat, Jim? Is that like a platform that people can build on, or?
Yeah, for
Or
sure.
is-
And speaking of Unity, the VR chat community, the prefabs community has created an awesome database of prefabs that you can just bring into your worlds. And I really do think like VR chat is a must visit, you know, platform for any kind of metaverse builder or researcher. I've got a lot of hours in there just kind of building things, talking to people and exploring worlds. I get a lot of inspiration from it, but the community has created a database of prefabs useful for avatars and worlds and organized it all like this and created a community around such. And so you don't have to be a coder to like implement some of these really cool different abilities. You can remix them for your for your things, but yeah, I just think there's so much to learn. I would love to do field trips and offsites more so in VR chat. I know some worlds that would make a really good playlist that can kind of guide people towards some dank ideas about the metaverse.
Cool. Yeah, that's something that Adam and I are talking also about, is kind of go into these spaces and learn more about them as sort of a field trip. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be a great idea.
All right. And then just for our last slide, Jin, is what should we be building for the open metaverse as builders who are just getting started exploring it? I see some of the work that you've done also that I think are very important. Of course, you mentioned you're inspired very heavily by the Internet Archive, which is this screenshot on the lower left, like a space to kind of store all the knowledge that is in VR. And I see you also work pretty closely or created a co-working space for the open metaverse groups. I do feel that something that should be done is we are building for the open metaverse, so we should like create spaces that kind of explore how to collaborate in these new spaces that we're building. And of course, Meta is doing their own version, right? What do we need to know as Meta builds out these spaces and isn't building in the open as much as these other platforms? And I know you also work on some digital fashion as well. So yeah. So with that context, what should we be looking to build now that the open metaverse is coming in the next few years?
it reminds me of one of the very first slides about how cross-discipline building the metaverse is. And this is kind of why, I mean, I don't want to say like, all of these are valid. I mean, they are. But, because that would lead to almost like a paralysis of choice. But this is why I've been designing this kind of overworld in which you can kind of visualize different communities that are building different parts, and then you can kind of align with the ones that resonate with you the most. So if you're into avatars and fashion, then MetaFactory is definitely the place. And I do think like participating in a DAO is a must. Like it's kind of like going to the gym if you're building like in Web3. Coordination is kind of like the meta game of all of this, slaying Moloch and just finding ways that we could coordinate better in a, using these tools. And I've been also just like the space that you see on the top left is something that I built in a day using Frame VR to kind of break silos between an org itself, because like OMI, the Open Metaverse Interop group, has a bunch of working groups, but like the nodes and the working groups meet separately. And so like even within an org, there's like every URL is a silo in a way. You only have so much screen space, so you can't spread things out and kind of see the bigger picture sometimes when you're always like zoomed in on one little piece of it. And that's why like virtual worlds can create a really seamless interstitch kind of like, I think the digital garden is going to help people see the bigger picture eventually. Yeah, and that open metaverse framework, Mark Zuckerberg's talk from Meta Connect last year, I think was, and this year as well, there's just a lot to kind of look at from a like abstract level of how you explain things and the visual language as well that we could use to kind of explain maybe the open source decentralized alternatives of it. But I also want to kind of visualize it in a world. So I'm kind of creating something I dub Maker's District, where there'll be NPCs that you could talk to get quests related to different roles and skills that you have that are like based on open source tasks and things that are, the great online game versus like, fetch this item for me and, receive your reward. So I want to find ways to kind of gamify earning and learning, the skills required to build the open metaverse. And I do have a guide up on GitHub called Get Good. M3, has membership via completing some tasks that help you kind of get into the mindset, like a mad hacker scientist, that you can get into that kind of zone and start a journal. I think documentation is hugely important for coordination and accountability and measuring value creation and teach, learn, build. If you can just do that and repeat the cycle, that is kind of the engine to for building things. Yeah, making an avatar and then making a world and then showing how you did such earns a membership. And I'm trying to find ways to kind of gamify it further. Like if you venture down the skill tree, then maybe there's NFTs that are only earned, through like completing some harder challenges and whatnot. I'm very interested in like using fashion to make a statement about things that you've done and places you've been versus things that you've bought.
Yeah,
I got like a whole war room about that. War rooms are a really good use case of virtual worlds. Basically, how people will go into like a office and then put post-it notes everywhere, kind of like you've seen that screenshot there. Well, you don't need like a crazy printer and to bring everyone into the real world. You could do that all virtually. Now here's like an example space I've got for MetaFactory.
It's like a mood board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you can use those softwares, like Figma, Miro, pure ref and bring them into here, but as part of something bigger, you know. So like this I made in pure ref, an image viewer you can download, very much like Miro or Figma. And this is kind of how I'm thinking about onboarding, you know, like reacting for a role when you join the Discord, and earning badges and cool items related to that role as you complete quests, you know.
Cool. It's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it come together. And one thing that is a nice synergy as well, Jin, is I think what you're working on has some very nice parallels around building games, not as finite games, but like building it as an infinite game where the goal is to get more people into playing in the space rather than just winning a competition. So it's really amazing that you are building these things and looking at to get more builders building with us here. And I don't want to put Nirmala on the spot, but Nirmala, who joined us, also is working on some fashion with the Fabricant, and yeah,
Oh,
and I
cool.
do feel like there's a lot of things to learn from what's happening here. And yeah,
Yeah.
Nirmala, if you want to say anything, I love it.
Hi. Sorry, I just no, I'm just at home with my baby in case he starts yelling. Yeah, no, I wanted to tune into this one because yeah, I think it's super. The metaverse stuff is obviously something that we're really, yeah, like deep into, and we've done stuff with crypto voxels, Decentraland, Sandbox, and Spatial. And I think like, yeah, I mean I think it's just like at the moment it's very still labor intensive, right? And I think that's your experience too, that it's very manual, like trying to, the interoperability I think is really
Yeah,
still kind
these are
of
the good old
challenging.
days. You need like grit in order to make it out here. It's like the Wild West. That's why I
Yeah,
use the desert a
definitely.
lot in my maps. It's like I'm trying to like visualize the grit that you need to last out here in the beating sun of the virtual world. And there's a working group at the Metaverse Standards Forum all about avatars and fashion as well.
Yeah, no, that's, I think that, well, one thing that's interesting, I know Decentraland and Spatial are actually working together a lot more to kind of create, to think about like we did a thing where there were like portals between the spaces, and then the wearables were also kind of, they were separate NFTs, but they were kind of, you know, available in the two portals. And I know that Decentraland and DAO like working on linked wearables where it's like a single NFT could link assets across different spaces. But I think again, like it's all still, yeah, like you said, we're still like out in the Wild West trying to, you know, figure it all out. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think the other thing the Fabricant's really interested in, especially with the avatars, is diversity of, you know, body shapes, sizes, creatures, whatever it is. Yeah, I don't know. Do you know anything about Cornerstone Land, or is that one you're tracking or aware of?
I haven't heard of Cornerstone, but I'm totally with you on the different bodies and shapes. I've been working on a virtual world where you can kind of walk through a digital backlot of different characters that you could use in interop testing. Like in this image right over here, you see how like there's all sorts of different NFT and, you know, Ready Player Me and different avatar types. And if you can create a wearable that can work across well, I think it's not going to be all fully automated. I think there's going to be an in-between sweet spot where we have like a you know, we keep humans in the process as avatar tailors and help, you know, sort of spur the virtual economy, and put more money in the pockets of artists for helping add compatibility for certain items or collections.
Yeah, and I think it's like, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the standards, because I think that's also something like, yeah, I'm curious to see what that process is to develop the standards, you know, like who's involved. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that metaverse standards. I think I may have heard of it, but not really what's
It's brand
actively.
new. They're just getting started. So Metaverse Standards Forum is now like 1,900 plus members. It just started
Oh,
over the
that's a lot.
summer. And they don't want to like create standards themselves, but help coordinate requirements and resources to help foster and accelerate, the speed of testing and working on such. So hackathons, plug fests, consistent terminology and deployment guidelines, things like that. I'll drop a link in
Oh, yeah.
here. The fashion group meets up every other week.
Thanks. The fabricant should be part of that.
Maybe another entry point is the top left corner you see there, where you see OMI group, MSF and stuff. That actually meets up like there's like every day of the week, which you could find a working group working on some of these things. Tomorrow would be good to connect with folks working on some of these things. Maybe we can use this co-working space.
How do you connect? Is it just a Discord that you can connect with them on, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Omigroup.org. And I have a community calendar that weaves between all of these different communities and orgs. So like, and my community calendar, because it's not just one community helping build a metaverse, it's like many. So the calendar reflects that with events that are happening all across different places. So we've got like virtual production on Mondays, avatar interop, because to spread adoption of standards, you need to do a little bit of promotion as well. What's the use cases? What can it unlock for that project or community? Tuesdays is avatar interop meetup and workshops, and then Wednesdays OMI meets up to talk about MSF, and Thursdays is a lot of fashion and GLTF stuff, and then Fridays we do like a build-a-thon and world hop.
Is this like I think, yeah, we'll definitely have to join. I'm super would love to share this with our community, because I think there's a lot of people. Yeah, super interesting. I'll definitely share it. And how do you
Are there
do
any
the chat? Is
discussions?
it just sorry, I was gonna say,
No,
is
no,
it just
go. I was going to change
No,
something.
sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Nirmala.
is it like a Discord hang that you guys do when you do the meetups?
No, we well, sometimes it is for like OMI group, for example. M3 has been meeting up in virtual world since inception, and I just think that you got to have a little bit of both, because over time, every video call or Discord call kind of starts to blur together, whereas it's more kind of memorable to be in a virtual world, and you could use Discord as like a back channel communication. Yeah, but it's good to be in a space, and actually test these things out. And
yeah, super cool. And I think the other thing that could be cool to talk about with that group is like creating events and engagement in metaverses, because I think that's one challenge. I think is like, like we'd kind of create these events like the real world, but the metaverses have these limits on capacity. I don't know, like I've learned a lot in that capacity too, so I'd love to talk more about that. But yeah, I'll pass it to Adam.
I just wanted to talk a bit about this non-humanoid avatar shape thing you brought up, Nirmala. I was actually talking to some of your folks at Fabricant a while ago about helping to build a space in VR chat with some of the people I hang out with in different community, which I think you guys should still do, because I know you were getting a whole bunch of headsets, and it's a great place to come and see how people sort of shapeshift and try different avatars on and on. I think there's definitely a side, and Jin, you can probably speak to this more than I can, where people have an identity that they stick with and they don't flip around, but there's a lot of play around identity, gender, race, sexuality, or creature, or whatever you might be in VR chat, which is having a really positive effect on people's behavior, I think, because essentially you're performing for one another in different forms or shapes. But it's fascinating thing, I think, to think about, because I guess a lot of the thinking right now with avatars and fashion stuff coming to metaverse is humanoid and human-shaped clothing, and I think it's a great idea to think about how that fashion could be adaptable to different forms or sizes. I mean, what's a beautiful thing to experience as well, and you can do this in VR chat, is go from being something the size of a tiny little fairy and then you're a 3-story dinosaur, and how the shape changes perspective in your, and how your brain processes that. So I think with relation to fashion as well, I think that's a fascinating area to explore. Anyway,
For sure. Yeah, especially with AI stuff. This is why I love Loot. I'm glad that y'all had Tim Shell on, because Loot inspires me a lot. Because maybe it's not just like Interop in terms of the canonical form of that wearable, but rather the traits that persist between it that can be stylized in many different variations.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tim Shell was also one of the speakers that people liked a lot during the Gaming Guild, because they kind of have a vision for interoperability that not a lot of these projects do. I feel like they're the ones who really need to succeed in the metaverse, and not just these very simple projects that aren't pushing the boundaries of storytelling the way they are doing.
Did you see the book
Cool.
project that you just started?
Yeah. It's where they minted a book, right? Like from
Yeah.
the stories that were made by the Quill
On-chain
people,
text, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. So one thing that I talked with Tim Shell as well was like a lot of the things that we're building are a bit skeuomorphic right now, but we kind of need to think of, for example, how did Dungeons and Dragons start? Like before, no one could imagine what that was, right? Just people playing role-playing games together, and now it's become kind of sort of the seed for all of these video games that we're now playing. So we're very early days, and it's this kind of divergent thinking that we really need, I feel.
I can't wait for Webverse to show some of the story studio stuff it's working on. It's like
Oh, is
D&D
there
with
anything you?
AI in a way where you can
Oh,
create your
yeah.
own like virtual world MMO in real time collaboratively.
Oh, it's really interesting. Yeah, and AI as well. I feel that's something that we should discuss more in kernel. Like AI, there's a lot of advancements happening. And yeah,
That's
Adam, maybe
speeding
that's
up game
something we
dev
can.
and virtual productions a lot. So yeah, it's a force multiplier in game dev.
Yeah.
hey Jen, what you guys are using GPT-3 in some form for Webverse? What exactly are you guys using?
It's all hot swappable. So that's kind of the beauty of it. You can choose the service provider and input your own keys. There's like 7 different services that you could I don't know. Last I checked, that was weeks ago, and stuff is constantly being updated and whatnot. So GPT-3 is one of them. Eleuther AI and GPT-J is another one that you could use for free.
Nice. Yeah, maybe we can have you on, Jin, for a AI discussion sometime. Do you look into AI also?
I know that if I took a real hard, I've been doing AI and VR stuff since like Deep Dream came out, and made a lot of really cool stuff. And I showed kind of like some of the things that I did, like the Internet Archive world where you saw it all stylized. But I'm indirectly doing AI stuff, because if I know I went all in, I would get nerd sniped, and it wouldn't
Yeah,
hear from me
exactly.
for a while.
No, there's so much to learn from all of these other fields. So, and you're right about it being a force multiplier. I did see Loot doing that, wherein they just put in a sentence, I think, in Midjourney, and then they use that as concept art for making the asset. And then I can easily see like AI making the 3D assets out of that. So it's gonna be crazy the next few years.
Yeah, it's gonna be real fun.
Yeah. That's cool. Thanks a lot, Jin. It's been a really fun talk. I feel like every one of us learned a lot. If anyone has any other questions for Jin, maybe unmute or just ask on the chat. If not, then I think we can end it there.
Here's a
And
loot thing I did.
are you in the kernel disc Slack group as well, or is it
I'm more of a Discord person.
yeah, okay,
Can
fair enough.
hit me up anytime on Discord. I'll
Yeah,
drop
I'll hit
my
you up on
tag.
Discord.
Cool. Maybe yeah. I was just saying share. So Jin shared his Discord on chat, so connect with him there. Cool.
Yeah,
So
thanks for having me, y'all. It's been a
yeah,
pleasure.
Thank you, Jin. So I'll stop sharing, stop recording now. But thank you for joining us. I think it's been a really great session.
Yeah, thanks very much.
No problem. I'll see y'all in the metaverse. Cheers.